And this is what caught my attention once. Insulin enhanced the cytotoxic effect of methotrexate in MCF7 human breast cancer cells in vitro by a factor of up to 10,000. And I knew that, and when I saw this citation, I really was very happy. I followed up with this guy, Alabaster, over at George Washington. And for some reason, there was no interest in pursuing this. They did a couple of studies, but then they dropped it. And I can't understand what I just can't understand why they would do that. I think they were afraid of insulin, maybe. Anyway, in the article, the authors discussed possibilities of the membrane. They said that the mechanism of what had happened there was related to a membrane effect, a metabolic effect, and then in my own consideration of things, I add this cellular differentiation effect. And I'm going to go through the three of these things. But first of all, I want to go back and talk about just that first slide with the cell and all the little arrows and everything talking about the mechanisms of malignancy. So here's some scientific stuff about the mechanism of malignancy. Insulin, IGF-1, epidermal growth factor, transforming growth factors, alpha and beta, are autocrine growth factors in human breast cancer cells. Let me just stop for 1 second here and say, I talk about cancer cells generically. The citations, most of them are about breast cancer cells, and that's because the vast majority of funding for cancer research in this country is for breast cancer. And I extrapolate from those findings to cancer in general. And the reason I do that is because the clinical evidence demonstrates that the treatment works for cancer across the board. Solid tumors, adenocarcinoma, it just does. And as a matter of fact, on the very last page of my thing in the syllabus is a letter from a physician I trained, the first doctor that I trained, Dr. Noonan in Pennsylvania, and he reports on a case of a desmoplastic round small cell tumor, which I never heard of. There's only 100 cases of it reported in the medical literature. And he treated it with IPT, and it had, significant clinical response with very, very greatly reduced doses of chemotherapy. So I use that as corroboration of the validity of extrapolating. Okay, back to this. These factors are autocrine growth factors in human breast cancer cells. It is the inappropriate later expression of such autocrine growth factors originally required by cells during normal embryogenesis that accounts for malignant transformation. Through this autonomous self-stimulation, cells overcome restriction points in the normal cell cycle, thus becoming cancerous. This is the New England Journal of Medicine. Of all these growth factors, IGF-1 has been reported to be the most potent growth-promoting mitogen for breast cancer cells. And again, I extrapolate that it's the same for all cancer cells. And I do that because it fits nicely with the mechanisms of the treatment as I've described them. The secretion of insulin and IGF-1 and the elaboration of specific receptors for these ligands has been well characterized in human breast cancer cell lines. And there are numerous reports identifying the synthesis and secretion of insulin and the insulin-like growth factors in cancers of the breast, lung, colon, melanoma, cervix, renal cell carcinoma, fibrosarcoma, Hodgkin's lymphoma, insulinoma, as well as the one hematologic malignancy, lymphoblastic leukemia. The specific receptors for these ligands have likewise been well characterized on the cell membranes of these cancers. So maybe I should have saved that story about extrapolating for after this slide. You see, there is a lot of evidence for a lot of other cancers, but it's not all of them. The extrapolation that I make is based on the fact that there's a lot of evidence in breast cancer. There's some evidence in these several other cancers here. And as I said, my extrapolation is that it's for cancer in general. I put this one in because it says insulin receptors are widely distributed in mammalian organisms, with there being from 100 to 100,000 receptors per cell in different tissues. Rarely are there any cells having no receptors at all. I graduated medicine in 1971. Back in second year medicine, I remember, insulin physiology. The insulin receptors are liver, adipose tissue, and skeletal muscle. That was what I was told. That was it. Then, round about the end of second year, I remember once one lecture this guy threw in, and the ciliary body of the iris. Okay? So I had to sort of, take that program out and rewrite it and stick it back in. And I remember thinking at that time, gee, I wonder if there might be insulin receptors on other tissues that we just don't know about yet. It was a very important step for me. The reason that's why I put this up, because it was a very important step for me to be able to because I remember how offended I was by the ciliary body of the iris. You know, I knew that it was on liver, adipose tissue, and skeletal muscle, and that was, but ciliary body, that really threw me. So I just wanted to bring that one in because it relates. It relates. About the receptors, human breast cancer cells have 6 times more insulin receptors and 10 times more IGF receptors than normal tissues in the body. This is a wonderful piece of medical writing. I really love this. This is by Zaff and Frosch. And they describe the essence of what I told you about the mechanisms of malignancy. This combination of insulin and IGF-1 operates autonomously at the cellular level within tumors, and this operation is free from any higher level of integrated control. Again, let me just do this an aside. You'll notice that these mechanisms, IGF-1, that's part of normal physiology, as is insulin. And in health, those are subject to higher levels of integrated control. That's what creates, health. It's this integrated system. Cancer is not subject to higher levels of integrated control. Cancer is totally autonomous, and it usurps these mechanisms for gathering fuel and for stimulating growth and turns them into a malignant, deadly process that can kill human beings. So they operate autonomously at the cellular level within tumors, and this operation is free from any higher level of integrated control. The two work together in an autocrine and or paracrine manner and in a complementary fashion, with IGF-1 being the major anabolic hormone responsible for mediating messages about growth in the tumor, while insulin regulates and provides the fuel for these processes. I love it. Very good medical writing.